finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo and no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Okay, well, welcome back to BS Free MD. We have not done this in a while. We are doing a Doctales with Cocktales, and it's an episode actually we've wanted to do for quite a while. This one, I suppose, gets into some sensitive areas. We are going to mercilessly mock direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical ads,
which, in other words, is, for the people that know what direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical ads are,
television advertisements primarily for drugs.
Drug commercials.
Yeah, drug commercials, and we're going to get into some of the history, some of the statistics that will really blow your mind on how unbelievably pervasive these are. And we're going to have some fun with this. Meanwhile, we are having some cocktails.
Since it is Doctales with Cocktales,
yes,
we'll share. I think you need to.
We'll share.
We'll really reveal the big secret at the end.
Yes,
He's crystal.
I'm crystal. She's steel.
I'm metal.
Metal and crystal.
I guess you're more fragile.
I guess.
Cheers.
Cheers.
This is hard to do without looking at each other and looking on camera. We're not really that television ambidextrous.
So we'll reveal exactly what we're drinking, but I am drinking gin, kind of in honor of the Queen. She was a big gin fan. Her favorite cocktail was a Dubonnet and gin.
But can you find Dubonnet anywhere around here?
No.
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
Nobody knows what it is.
But we can have some very good gin to honor the Queen, and I always imagine the Queen sitting down for a cocktail with, when Prince Philip was still alive, and just like, Philip, bring me my gin. Your Queen needs a cocktail. And bring your royal scepter, because after a couple sips, I get quite randy. Yes.
Da-da-da.
Yeah, I'll be here all week.
Cue the background laughter like on Seinfeld.
Yeah, we could have a laugh track. That would be amazing. Anyway, so...
Oh, my gosh.
Actually, it makes me quite randy as well. So, May, start us off with some of the interesting historical facts as far as direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising. My understanding, and there's only 2 countries in the world that allow it. One is the United States. The other one is it blew my mind when I found out who it was.
Yeah,
it is
New Zealand.
Wow.
New Zealand is the only other country that allows direct-to-consumer advertising. And otherwise, not in Canada. So for our Canadian friends, I think they watch TV feeds from the US, so they get all the commercials. But Europe, Asia, not even a chance. So if you didn't know about that, you might find it unusual that other countries don't get bombarded with Cialis, Viagra, Jardiance, your favorite diabetic or cancer drug on television. It is the biggest, one of the biggest, and I'll get to that in a bit, money feeds to the commercial industry on television, the pharmaceutical industry. It blew my mind when I found out how much money they spend on commercials.
Well, I've always been intrigued by what they advertise, though.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I understand advertising boner pills, right? That makes perfect sense because a guy may be embarrassed. He doesn't want to talk to his doctor. So it's like, hey, there's a treatment. The treatment's quite effective. Talk to your doctor. Don't be embarrassed. Your doctor's used to hearing this, blah, blah, blah. That kind of makes sense, something like that. But the ones that just absolutely blow my mind are the cancer drugs. These companies are spending billions and billions of dollars a year to advertise on, college football games and the NFL and all of these really expensive places to advertise. And they're advertising cancer drugs.
And very specific ones, too. And targeted therapy, not just,
And it
it's
only
a cancer pill, it's a Motrin or Tylenol.
Right. But the thing that's crazy about it is it obviously works or they wouldn't do it. So that's been the
Yep.
thing that's always blown my
Well,
mind
we'll
about
get
this
into
kind
that.
of
The
advertising,
market impact. Yes.
which is okay. You go to an oncologist, right, for your, metastatic whatever cancer, and this guy's gone to school, guy or gal has gone to school for like a minimum of, what would you say, 20 years after high school, because they're going to do an internal medicine residency after medical school, and then they're going to do usually a fellowship in either radiation or a medical oncology. Sometimes they specialize in a sub variant of the body as far as oncology.
And then they're usually a chemo, a radiation.
Yeah. So
or
like medical oncology, radiation
specific
oncology,
type,
etc.
yes.
Okay. So you got this guy with 15 or 20 years of training after high school. And then, if they've worked for a while, God knows how much experience and patients they've seen and whatnot. And somehow, by magic, they are influenced by a guy coming in who was sitting there on his 8th beer watching football and going, wow, maybe my lung cancer from the Camels could be treated with Optivo. And I'm like, how on earth does that ever make sense?
Jumping way ahead of the program I've laid out, but yes, there's studies on how it makes sense.
Okay, well, let's get to that, because that makes you can explain it, because you got some explaining to do, because that makes zero sense to me.
So DTCA, or direct to consumer advertising, does, it includes, obviously, so that means to the people, television, magazines, and of course now social media. Here we are. But the biggest you think of is television, I think. So initially, advertising from pharmaceutical companies to physicians, started like not that long ago. It was really in the early, I think, 50s and 60s, where they really started marketing to physicians in journals, so medical magazines, and they would have to put down all the indications, like what the drug is for, potential side effects and toxicities. And they still have to do that today. And they started doing this, pretty much in, like I said, the publications, but then into the, everyone knows offices. Then they started marketing direct to physicians' offices, which they still do today, to sway them into purchasing.
Then it got really super good in
product.
the 80s, where they take you to the Caribbean.
Yeah. Well, that's
and that all went away. Like you, unless it was specifically educational, like everything had to be educational.
Right.
So I got in on one at the very end. It was like 2000. So it was 22 years ago. And I got to go cat skiing.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yes,
with a drug
I was like,
rep.
You didn't go to the Caribbean.
And so they brought in some doctor to tell us about how great these products were, and then we're like, yeah. And they feed you a bunch of beers and whatever, and then you go skiing for a day with a drug rep, and it was like, this is awesome, right? And then the drug that he was trying to sell you got pulled by the FDA 2 years later. It was amazing. So it was like guilt-free skiing for free.
No kidding.
Thank you. But that's all gone. That part's gone, because and you know what? I don't think, with how effective direct to consumer advertising has been, I don't think the pharmaceutical companies gives two craps about that. But as far as, really pressuring doctors.
No, do you think that they missed that? No.
But the thing that's amazing is, because I've talked to some of the pharmaceutical representatives, and they've come clean, and they know exactly who prescribes how much of their medication.
Oh, I'm sure.
They get that insider information.
I'm sure.
They're allowed to get that insider. So they know that Dr. X is a big prescriber, Dr. Y in the same clinic isn't, and they know who to leverage when they come in. I mean, it was really crazy. And so what a lot of physician practices have done is just said, we don't talk to salespeople at all. And I think that's probably far more ethical. But
no kidding.
Anyway, less free food and smoking hot blondes.
So I started doing a little digging and research. Of course, fun reading on Wikipedia, but I found a really fun conversation with the transcript from NPR radio on an interview that.
When was it done?
The interview? September of 21.
Oh, so it's very recent.
Yeah, on Planet Money. And it's called This Is Your Brain on Drug Ads. And the two co-hosts interviewed The gentleman, they blame him responsible for the direct-to-consumer ads. His name is Lou Morris.
So this Lou Morris
Morris worked on drug advertising for 2 decades at the Bureau of Drugs, the FDA, and the.
So he's kind of the father of direct-to-consumer advertising.
Yeah, like he says in the interview, you can blame me for direct-to-consumer advertising.
Fascinating. So this, but this is on NPR.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they're like, so I just, when I hear NPR in an interview, I imagine that it's Christmas time.
The reading was good and it's fun.
And it's Season's Eatings with Alec Baldwin.
No, okay, stop. Okay, let's get to it. So anyway,
everyone loves your Christmas balls.
So
and your direct-to-consumer, drug ads are really satisfying.
Stop. So there's some fun in this.
My drugs are here for your pleasure.
Pretty much. So Lou says the drug companies, wanted to target more than doctors and pharmacists, and they started approaching the FDA to feel it out how they could do that. And, they had a lot of concerns. And I think they pitched a few ideas before the first commercial goes out on the air, which I'll get to. There was a company that had a blood pressure medication, and they wanted to pitch the ad. And so basically what they had was, I guess it was really terrible. They were going to show this guy outside, and he's playing around. And one of the side effects of the high blood pressure medication was impotence, inability to have.
Well, he wasn't playing around outside then, was he?
So they didn't know how to put that in the ad, and they wanted to, I don't know, apparently make it so that they could still sell it. So they put this tagline in it, and it just said, "And Dolores likes it too." And the wife's standing there all happy. Well, I guess the FDA
or Dolores hates it because she liked the droopy pills much better, because then she never had to see Sam naked. There is that kind of relationship,
So
it happens. I've heard of
I think this. Sorry, I should say. I think from what I remember, most of the high hypertension drugs that they were using at the time had impotence as a side effect. This new drug that they were pushing didn't have that, so that's how they were going to sell it. Was that Doris likes it too? Very speculative. And then they tried to run it past one of these other guys that was the head back then, who was quite religious apparently, and he was offended and said no. So they had to come up with some better stuff. So that was the first push.
Well,
it got turned down.
Religious people don't care about impotence.
They didn't like the connotations. So long story short, along comes this young girl whose name is Liz, and she's working for a British drug company called Boots. So Boots had a U.S. office, and Boots actually is the drug that discovered ibuprofen, believe it or not. So back then, it was only prescription, so you could only get ibuprofen.
Well, so this is like the 60s or 70s.
This is in the late 70s. And so Boots let another company in the U.S. sell ibuprofen under the name Motrin. And Motrin was really successful, so Boots decided to compete with them and sell their own drug in the U.S., and they called it Rufen. It sounds like roofies, I know, but it's Rufen. So selling Rufen through a TV ad became this girl, Liz Mensch. She was like 23 at the time. Anyway, long story short, and I won't go through all the details. You can read it on this transcript. It's really fascinating. She pitches this idea and, looks at all the rules and regulations. She knows that they know that, in print ads, you had to put all the disclaimers. How they're going to do this on television. So they figured out how to get around it. And I'm going to read the clip because the commercial, you can look at it. It's on YouTube, the first TV ad, and it came out in 1983, and it aired mostly in Florida. And this is what it said.
Why would you need ibuprofen in Florida? Oh, that's right. It's all old people.
So
at least it was all old people.
I'll read it, and then you'll catch on what they did, and then we'll talk about the types of commercials on TV. But basically, there's this man standing at a chalkboard with a diagram, and he says, "You should ask your physician or pharmacist about Rufen. they will tell you that both Motrin 400 milligram tablets and Rufen 400 milligram tablets are different brand names for the same drug, ibuprofen. There's only one important difference. Rufen can cost you considerably less. And that's the commercial. So the gist of it is that they didn't say what Rufen did. They equated it to Motrin. And most people back then knew what Motrin was and what it was for. So they connected the dots. And then they said that Rufen costed less. So that's why you should get it. So they didn't say what Rufen did.
Right.
And therefore, they did not have to say what it was for and what the side effects potential was. It was just genius. So they didn't have to. That's how they got around the mandatory disclaimer.
So no disclaimers.
Right.
Because they could name the drug. But because they didn't tell you what the drug did, it was just.
They didn't have to because they used Motrin. Right. Motrin told you what the drug
did. It's like that god awful Levitra ad from like 2004, where it just says Levitra, talk to your doctor. It's a new treatment. They don't say anything about ED. They just show this guy trying to throw a football through a tire.
Yes.
And of course, he can't throw the football through the tire because his football is deflated. And unless you're Tom Brady, in which case, if it's deflated, it works.
I don't know if it was deflated. He just didn't know how to hit the hole. Didn't even look for the hole. I don't think it showed it in a shed.
How stupid is that ad?
The commercial is so bad.
Like seriously, the guy is trying to throw a football. Like he can't get the football in the hole.
I don't even think his hands grabbed the football correctly. Anyway,
so take Levitra.
But okay, so to my point, that is actually one type of commercial that is still allowed on TV today. Do you remember that horrible commercial? It was for Lunesta, I think. Wasn't it Lunesta where those creepy glowing butterflies are flying in? And
take Lunesta and you will sleep, but you will be hallucinating the entire time.
So with commercials, there is, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, but basically there's three kinds, and there is the direct product claim where you have to, this is like, this product is going to treat stage 1 cancer. Side effects can include, and they have to list them all, benefits, etc. So they have to include one indication and the claims of its benefits, as well as, the trade name. But then there's the other commercials called reminder advertisements. It's just to build brand recognition. So like for instance, there was those Viagra commercials where basically there's like a guy and a woman walking on a beach and they're smiling and looking all romantic and talking about, now we can stay up late and sleep in the morning, and they're all hugsy wugsy. And then it's like, talk to your doctor about ED. So they're equating ED.
Right. And then they have a website, which is whatever that the drug company owns, and it directs you to that, right?
Right. So there's the innuendos because people piece it together, and then there's help.
Talk to your doctor about fungating ass cancer.
Well, that's the help.
Ass cancer.
That's another kind of ad where it's called help seeking. So it's like talking about ED or fungating butt cancer, and then they will equate medications later in other commercials, and then you're like, oh, connect the dots. But basically, the ones we like to make fun of are the actual product claim ones because we laugh at all the silly side effects that get listed. So as time has gone on from that first commercial, which is pretty cool to see, there's been some crazy ones over the years, but the drug companies saw that this was working, obviously, and that what was happening was patients are now going, maybe I will go talk to my doctor about this medication. So to your point, does it really work? They've done market analysis on it and on how much they've spent. But they basically showed that the FDA was worried that it was going to influence physicians' decision-making, obviously. The drug companies hope it influences the decision-making. But what they really found was that they wanted to... They're targeting, and the drugs that they're spending money on in the ads are the newest ones that have been out 1 to 3 years because they want the people to be bringing up these new medications that are not generic yet to influence their physicians. they find that some physicians still actually will prescribe generic alternatives, but ultimately the data shows yes, it does
Okay,
impact.
so how much of it is like, because one of the arguments I've heard
prescribing.
for why it's a good idea to have direct to consumer pharmaceutical advertising, and this is a rational argument, is that it increases disease awareness in the general population.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you didn't know
Yes.
the signs of fungating ass cancer and it was going to kill you, and you saw an ad because you're an avid football fan, and you went, oh, I better talk to my doctor, and you go to the site and you go, I have all of the symptoms of this, rare disease that's going to kill me, then I should go.
Yes. So
So
that was part of it, is that especially for things like there's so much, actually, we talked about this before, but the top 3 categories of pharmaceutical advertising were in mental health, depression, diabetes, and arthritis. So a lot of people would be, oh yeah, now I feel better about talking to my doctor because there's commercials on television advertising Abilify or all these mental health medications. Then so their thinking is that it's going to take the stigma away and make it better. You're right, more patient awareness. Somebody that could have this funky rash or joint pain, and they're like, oh, I never heard of like psoriatic arthritis or rheumatism. There's treatment for that. I'll go talk to my doctor, when a lot of times people will just stay at home and tough it out. So the thought process in the marketing is that it's actually creating awareness, not just the brand, but of the condition. The other fascinating thing I read too was that the very first commercial targeting patients that wasn't on television, it was actually in print, and it was in Reader's Digest. And it was actually for pneumococcal vaccine, for a pneumonia vaccine for 65 years and older. And the reason they did it, it was because they're like, most people are sitting at home, they're 65 or older, and if they're in good health, why the heck would they go to their doctor? It was back in the day. It was in the it was in the 70s, I believe.
But
and people aren't thinking that they needed this pneumonia shot, so they actually put it out there.
Right, but that's actually a rational advertisement.
Yeah.
Okay, so because they're healthy, they're at home reading Reader's Digest, and I remember, like, at my grandparents' both sets, there were
in the bathroom,
Digests everywhere, like
on the couch, or in the bathroom.
Yeah, all over the place. and
There's a Reader's Digest.
Both my
grandfathers, every public bathroom you went
both
to.
my grandfathers were born in 1900, so half the pages are ripped out because they're probably wiping their rear with it. It was like back in the outhouse, because they literally had outhouses. So at any rate, that makes sense. Okay, you're raising consumer awareness about a product that is potentially helpful for them, but they don't know that it's helpful for them. Okay, that to me is business 101. Okay, selling super expensive chemo agents for end stage cancers that extend your lifespan. In other words, increase the amount of time you have end stage cancer by only 90 days.
Well, people don't know that. Or
yes, they do, because all you got to do is push pause and read the little tiny fine print.
And that would be your specialty.
That's my specialty.
Most people don't, which we'll get to. So let's talk a little bit about how much, before we mock a lot of these, how much money they're spending on this stuff. Like, I heard I couldn't believe it. And I heard this stat a couple months ago, and I told you, and you were surprised. But at first I thought it was 75% of all commercials on TV were pharma ads. I'm like, no way, that can't be. Like, what about all the food, all those insurance companies? 75% of all money spent on commercials
on TV,
on television, is from pharmaceutical companies.
So what that means is they're buying more time. In other words, their ads aren't 30 seconds; they might be a minute.
They're buying prime time.
They're in prime time, and they're in big events.
Big event.
I mean, if you want to see, I watch tons of sports. If you want to see the most percentage of actual pharma ads, watch football.
Yes.
Like, watch college or professional football, because that is the American religion, right? I mean,
so that was fascinating to read too, is that they also have to get permission from the FDA also where they target the audience, because there was some Viagra ads that were on, like, I don't know, afternoon television and CBS, and kids are at home watching, I don't know, Barney and Friends or Clifford the Big Red Dog and seeing these commercials because they're
So you're
popping up
assuming that
when-
the FDA would say no to a pharmaceutical company?
anyway.
You're assuming that
They
actually
did,
happens?
because they do
I'm sorry,
police when
Clifford
the ads
Big
appear.
Red Dog can't be the spokesman for Viagra.
So there are some regulations, but so 75,
If you'd like your dog big and red,
75% of the money that is spent on commercials is from pharmaceutical industry.
like honestly, if this doesn't make you want to buy like
So how
an
much money is
offshore
that?
drilling rig and make your own country in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, I don't know what will.
And how much money is that, you ask?
It's a lot of money.
Well, in the last few years, and it's been consistently the same from 2016 to about 2021, what I could find, it is $6 billion a year. $6 billion a year.
I just think of the $6 billion man with
What's
inflation.
like I'm thinking, what is the GDP of some countries? Not even close to that.
$6 billion a year just on, and that's just in the United States, obviously in the United States, because New Zealand, I don't think is mopping up another.
No.
And then,
to take it further, you can find in order the top 10 ad spenders in big pharma, and it changes a little bit year to year, but for the most part, it is, I think Pfizer's the top spender in general, but the biggest commercial on television is Humira. That's been the biggest one. They are not Pfizer. They're from AbbVie. But after that, when I'll rattle these off really quickly, you'll get which categories we're hearing. Dupixent, that's an immunology drug. Next is Xeljanz, that's for RA, rheumatoid arthritis and ulcerative colitis. Skyrizi, AbbVie. Ozempic, that's a diabetic medication. Trulicity, a diabetic medication. Rinvoq, RA. Eliquis,
blood thinner.
And Opdivo, it's an immunotherapy and a cancer drug. Otezla for psoriatic arthritis and psoriasis, which is very specific.
So
that's the top 10.
Is mind blowing. What was it? 7 of the 10 are all rheumatology drugs.
Right. So you've got your diabetic meds, no surprise. A cancer, very specific cancer drug, rheumatology drugs, the colitis, arthritis.
That's wild.
Yeah, and a blood thinner.
That's so it's interesting because what these drugs are, when you're getting into these very esoteric monoclonal antibodies for very specific types of diseases, they're extremely high dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're lower volume, but they're high dollar. And actually, if you look at the trends, like when I was serving on a pharmacy and therapeutics committee for a company I used to work for that had a few lines of insurance companies. So we had to go through all of the drugs used for every insurance line that we had. It's super fascinating because the trend wasn't volume. Okay. Like you could easily see what the high volume stuff was, and it was really easy. It was what you would intuitively think: antibiotics and opiates, right? So like as far as number of pills, number one is opiates in all the different variations. And then, you go a couple steps down the line, and then it's tons of antibiotics and whatnot.
Antidepressants.
And then it's, then you have tons of psych meds, because a lot of antidepressant medications and so forth. But they weren't high dollar because a lot of them were generic. Okay. So you can write a bazillion Vicodins and it doesn't cost your health insurance company very much money. But the highest dollar amounts for entire insurance companies, okay, were neurological medications.
Oh, right. Of the cost of the medicines.
No, but the entire cost to the entire bottom line of the pharmacy side of the insurance companies. Okay. The total dollars spent, the drugs with the most in total dollars as a percentage of all of the dollars for all of the drugs that your insurance company is spending on were neurologics,
and
because they were using super duper high dollar multiple sclerosis drugs off label.
And is it because the R&D, the research and development, is so expensive on those that they have to recoup that
I don't know.
cost?
All
or
I'm
what
saying
is
is that apparently it's very easy to go into. I mean, it makes sense, right? So when you're dealing with MS, you're dealing with a disease that comes and goes on its own, and it's very random. It's also a super horrible disease, and there's not any real super effective treatments, right? It's not what hepatitis C has become, where you can take pills and you can be
Right.
cured of hepatitis C, right? So you got this terrible disease. The patients get better, they get worse. You don't know if your therapy is working. And then, you
But
get.
they're not advertising that one directly to patients
No,
on
they're not.
television.
But you go to the neurologist, and the drug rep says to the neurologist, this is the new sexiest thing on the block,
Mhm.
and it's got blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
whatever. Well, then you're the neurologist, and you only have like 3 tools in the tool, the tool belt. And the patient comes in, it's like, is there anything else we can try?
Right.
Well, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to try the next thing,
Of
right?
course,
Because you're
of
treating an
course.
illness that you can't cure. That's super horrible. And if it gets
Well-
better at all, it's amazing for the patient.
And that's the thinking
And these
behind
things are
these commercials, though.
massive amounts of money.
We're talking about chronic illnesses that are debilitating. So your ulcerative colitis, psoriatic arthritis, psoriasis, that's very debilitating. I mean, diabetes, well, that is just an epidemic
Well, right.
in this
And
country. And so it totally makes sense. The weird thing to me is when they're very specific targeted therapies like the chemo ones.
the
I'm
chemo
like,
doesn't make sense to me.
I don't understand it. I was looking too to see, I'm like, so how much of the budget is really spent on advertising? So they're spending, this $6 billion a year is going to these commercials, but it's actually a small percent. It's like 2% of their marketing, the 2% of their budget is really used for television ads. So these guys are making a ton of money.
A metric ton of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're saying is that it's only 2% goes to the television direct to consumer.
Right.
What I'd like to know
Do the math on that.
is how much of it goes to direct physician advertising, which is
Uh,
probably orders of magnitude more.
Well,
I mean, I would be floored if they have a budget less than 20% in total advertising, because they have
I might be able to
teams of
research that
highly
out here.
paid salesmen going to doctors' offices. Now, most doctors have kicked them out, so that's kind of dying. But then they own all these journals, and you go, well, they don't own the journal, really? When every other page in a medical journal is a pharmacy ad. You don't think the journals are entirely dependent on these guys? I mean, come on.
There is
use your head.
There's a website that's called Statista, and if you actually get full access and pay, you can read all of this. But they do talk about marketing budgets, of healthcare companies and pharmaceutical companies. It has gone down in the last couple of years, but I don't know exactly.
My guess is it's gone down because they fired a bunch of the drug sales
compared. Well,
because,
and then there's
because
been COVID happening as well, right? So there's a confounder in there, but yeah, I might have to hunt around and see what I can find.
We got, you got somebody that's making $100,000 a year plus benefits, driving around to doctors' offices with a huge expense sheet, buying everybody, Chipotle,
Mm-hmm.
and that just. Like, that's a lot of money. I mean, when you think of how many, they go to single physician practices with lunch for everybody. I mean, the way it used to be, it was like, that's a huge pile of cash.
Right.
But a lot of this I get. And again, we're not here to just be a tribe that bashes the living hell out of pharma companies.
No, we want to bash the hell out of their commercials here
yes,
soon.
because they are very funny. And I love funny stuff. But that said, May's life has been absolutely changed by a high dollar monoclonal antibody for migraine headache. It absolutely has revolutionized her life. It comes from a gigantic pharma company. It is an amazing drug.
Yeah, why isn't that advertised on television?
And it's worked really well. It's worked really, really well. Okay. So it's not like you don't need big pharma. But at the same time, you have to understand that, gigantic amounts of money and influence are peddled by these guys, which means there's going to be gigantic amounts of corruption.
Well,
That's just
I
the
think,
nature of humanity.
and the big concern, obviously, is that it's going to influence physicians who, back to what you said, you have your oncologist, yet any doctor with how many years of training, who knows the patient's condition best, who would have heard of most all these medications, even the newer ones coming down the pipe, and is trying to be influenced by the consumer, the patient. I mean, it's kind of fascinating in a way. It would be like if I saw a commercial on television for, I don't know, a certain kind of steel or nail, and I tried to tell my contractor building my house, well, I saw this kind of nail. What's that stupid tape that they use on TV? The guy's boat doesn't sink. Flex tape. I think you should maybe wrap my pipes with flex tape because I saw that on television. Is that influence?
Nothing like a good pipe wrapping.
Anyway, so that's the thing that's a little frightening. As well as being in medicine as long as we have, we've seen a lot of crap hit the market and get yanked off. So case in point, these direct-to-consumer ads are usually targeting the newest and latest and greatest, the first 1 to 3 years. Not a lot of data, and I think that most of them go out on television, have like about 6 months of information and studies behind them, so they can come out that early. And we all remember things about Vioxx and the Vioxx lawyers on TV. When they advertised Vioxx on television, everybody was running to their doctor to get this latest and greatest anti-inflammatory medication with not a lot of long-term data. Boom, all of a sudden everybody's got heart valve problems and it's pulled off the market.
Well, Bextra.
And there you go.
Bextra was from Pfizer, and that was one of the biggest, that was the single greatest fine ever paid by any business entity in the United States.
Yeah.
It was billions of dollars. It was, I think it was 2 or 3 drugs that were all bundled into this. The thing that was interesting, and I would encourage people to listen to this episode. I think his name is Dr. Abramson and he was on Joe Rogan, I don't know, a year or so ago. And he was the investigator, kind of the expert witness for kind of how this stuff is studied and how it's marketed to doctors and whatnot. And he started looking at the raw data because, in discovery, when a lawsuit goes on, they have to bring out their real data. Then he goes, they were guilty of felonies, of crimes, which of course he has a gag order he can't talk about. And so it comes through the trial. I mean, because the federal government is suing them or charging them or whatever they did. And they just pay a criminal penalty. They don't no one goes to jail. The guy that was the middle manager that said we should take the risk, or the board member or the CEO, they don't go to jail. They're just like, it's just a line item. They just go, we'll just line item this.
That was
no one goes to jail, and we'll just pay a fine.
Bextra, that was the rheumatoid osteoarthritis medication,
like
as well.
Vioxx. Yeah.
Pfizer was the pharmaceutical company that paid I can't even read it, $1.195 billion fine.
Yes, but that was that fine.
The largest criminal fee.
But that was the fine. I think the total penalty was $3 billion, because they had to pay the fine for going against the regulations. Then they had to pay the criminal penalty on top of it.
That was the largest fine in the history
Pfizer
of
yes. But they make vaccines and boner pills, so we like them.
That was a line item to them then? You know what that means.
Well,
now.
look. Okay, if it's a $3 billion, assume it's $3 billion, right? Maybe it was only $1.5 billion. Okay, and the entire industry, which is realistically only 15 or 20 companies that actually do this quite actively, right? Not even, is $6 billion, and that's 2% of their budget.
Yeah.
Pfizer is one of the biggest companies in the pharmaceutical companies in the entire world. I mean, it's what, Pfizer, Lilly, and Merck, right? Mm-hmm. And interestingly, 2 of them are German companies. Fascinating, isn't it? And they pay $3 billion. Well, if they made $4 billion on selling Bextra essentially illegally, who cares? You're still $1 billion ahead. because no one went to jail. That's the problem.
But like back to before we get to the funnies, I mean, think about it. You and I are people that were trained never to jump on a new drug bandwagon. But yet, say you have someone come along and I was like, oh, I'm just going to prescribe this old naproxen, sodium, whatever, to little old like Maisie. And Maisie comes in like, oh, I saw this commercial for Bextra and I have really bad RA and OA, and I'd like to give this new one a try. What do you think? And I'm like, well, I don't really like to try out new ones because I'm not really sure how they're. Well, yeah, but it looks really good. I mean, there's people. I know I wouldn't say that I would never be influenced. I'm like, well, she's asking. I told her that I don't think it's a great idea, but she doesn't want to listen to that advice, and I write it where I would have never thought about it before because.
But it's much worse because I remember listening to an audio digest, and I will call you guys out. We don't give two shits. We say what we think. I remember listening to an audio digest speaker when the COX-2 inhibitors came out, which was Celebrex, Vioxx, and Bextra. There was 3. Now there's 1. And it's amazing that Celebrex even exists. Okay. And these were supposed to be as good as ibuprofen and naproxen for anti-inflammatory. But because they had this different mechanism of action, COX-2, they didn't have the risk of stomach bleeding GI bleeding that the others did. Okay. And I remember listening to a guy speaking about these new sexy versions of anti-inflammatories, saying you as a physician may be held liable for a GI bleed if you are prescribing naproxen or Voltaren or ibuprofen instead of these new sexy ones.
Yeah.
And then what did we find out? The new sexy ones gave you a heart attack and you died way sooner than if you got a GI bleed. Fan-freaking-tastic. Yeah. Like seriously, that's like they get into these conferences and they get into the journals and it's like, well, I don't want to be held liable. I mean, I got to use this new sexy thing or, something's going to happen and I'm going to get sued. It's like, it is literally that scary.
All right. Well, let's take a little break quickly so that I can imbibe and we'll show our featured.
I wish this was sponsored. Trust me.
Well, this is not sponsored. This is semi-sponsored. And I'll just give a shout out to initials MI that I met in the store who suggested this fine indulgence for Tim. So I wouldn't have picked it out otherwise. It's totally blurry.
Uncle Val's Botanical Gin. This is a total.
It looks like Beloved, but that is Botanical Gin.
Winner. Honestly, this is like little British angels dancing on your tongue.
I will say that I don't drink gin because I'm allergic to juniper, sadly. But
yes, but if you took Humira, maybe you could drink gin.
Yeah,
and you could get tatered on juniper like everyone else.
I'd have to do the Claritin and the steroids.
You took Claritin.
Yeah. Anyway, and Humira and all of it. This stuff smells so wonderful. At first, it smells, and I have the best palate out of the two of us, so I would say. It smells.
I have the best liver.
I would like a bit of men's old aftershave to start with. I am not kidding.
Yeah, but that's like saying something smells like Aqua Velva is probably not appetizing.
Initially. But then you start to uncover these floral notes. And it is very smooth. And then when it hits your palate, the roof of your mouth, the back of your tongue, it just explodes with this really yummy floral, but not overpowering. And a hint of citrus. I catch some grapefruit and lime.
Like honestly, if you drink this and mix it, you are missing out.
Yeah.
Do not mix. This is straight. This is not gasoline gin like a lot of American classic gins, which really are just like pump gas. This is great.
Gin made from junipers. And, I didn't really realize this till I researched it later because I'm gluten-free. Gin is always gluten-free, if you didn't know that, because of the way it's distilled so many times. There's pretty much no gluten left in it, even though it's made from
Yeah, but like, okay,
grains.
if you if you have wheat vodka, how much freaking gluten is actually
Yeah, I
in
don't
it?
know. I'd have to
I
check.
mean, it's not. I mean,
Meanwhile,
like, give me a
I'll
break.
flash mine. We're not sponsored by them, but I'm really enjoying the botanicals. This is the kettle one, grapefruit and rose. And it is very grapefruity and rosy, and it's very yummy. But I always taint mine by putting lime in my martini. So, cheers.
You taint it. We're gonna get to taints
And
in
not
a
only
little while.
is that tainted, but so is this commercial. So, it's
Speaking
super
of
fun.
which,
It's almost as delightful as a Super Bowl showdown is to go back and look up stupid pharmaceutical commercials, the good, the bad, the ugly, because you just get a little flashback if you're as old as we are to all these things from the past. Um, as these evolved, like there's this one. I think it's for Abilify. Yes, it is, and it's super creepy. I don't know if you remember it, but it's this lady talking about her depression, how it's dark and gloomy, and this is a dark, a foreboding background. And everywhere she is, there's this black chalkboard in the background where I think it was when chalkboards must have come into vogue. Everybody's writing on them, but it has all the stats and data on it, and it's standing behind her in this dark, spooky room. And then she's out at the beach, and it's a coastal setting next to the beach, and there's a dock, and they're walking around, and they're outside, and then the chalkboard pops up in the background in in nature, and this spooky chalkboard. It's just like you think a hatchet's going to come out of it. I mean, to the creepy, like I don't know, the Claritin ads, there were some of them that were really pretty creepy with things fluttering in the background and people having strange glowing butterflies on.
well, that one was actually kind of true, because that whole family, Lunesta Sonata and Ambien, has all sorts of weird.
They should have shown someone coming down to their empty refrigerator with food all over the floor.
Psychologic, side effects. I mean,
Yeah.
But
of course, we all know that the Viagra ones are the funniest. I think.
Which were the ones with the two tubs, where they're sitting in remember they had the two little bathtubs. What was that? That was that La Vitra, or was that
Cialis?
I think that was Cialis, right? Like the two bathtubs.
Two bathtub Cialis commercial.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the two bathtubs, which makes perfect sense. Okay. Because if you're of the medical conditions or the age at which you would need assistance in your erections, having sex in an old-fashioned claw bathtub sounds like a perfectly good idea. Like they should have had a Hoyer lift over it, so when you're done, they can pick the two drowned dead old people out of the tub.
That sounds like a head injury waiting to happen.
But it's like, well, let's go to the beach. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to bring my 9,000 pounds, cast iron, porcelain coated claw tub, so we can sit naked next to each other in two different tubs and look at the sunset. So that is genius.
There's some stupid stuff. So I found
this one,
really
stupid.
Which, yes, I don't want to forget it before you get on to the fine print. Tim's
I love the fine print.
But there is a commercial for Eliquis, and it got pulled because of the subliminal messages they were sending that were completely erroneous. And I watched this thing, and it's super funny.
So Eliquis is a blood thinner. So if you need somebody on a blood thinner, traditional blood thinner like Coumadin, you can be on one of these, they're actually very good drugs. They're way safer. They're well tolerated. We've had them now for 15 or 20 years. Actually, I'm a big fan. When they first came out, I was like, no way in hell. Novel blood thinner, that sounds like a one-way ticket to bleeding out of your eyes. But actually, they've turned out to be really wonderful drugs.
Right. So it was, I want to make sure, I just wanted to make sure that I got it right. I'm pretty sure it was the Eliquis. Don't want to blame the wrong company. But anyway, I'll double check. They had this commercial where this gentleman gets off a plane and he's talking about his swollen leg. I was on the plane, yada, yada. found out he had a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis, had to go on a blood thinner, and how wonderful his blood thinner medication worked for him. The next fade in is this woman steps off of her Harley, and she's got this tough motorcycle jacket on, and she's 50 something. And she's like, yeah, I used to like to ride, but when I got this pain in my chest, my doctor told me it was a pulmonary embolus. And now I need to be on Eliquis. And they talk about the potential side effects. And they show these people as they're listing the benefits, the side effects, the risks. And the gentleman's happily walking around to get on another plane. And this woman is walking around with her cadre at this side bar in the middle of the desert. They're all getting off their bikes, walking around, smiling and happy as she, is riding her Harley, you assume, while on her blood thinner. So
wow,
that was not really cool.
Because I want to fall off a motorcycle on a blood thinner. That sounds like a wonderful. I actually know a guy who did.
So that
and
commercial
he survived,
got a lot of flack because they didn't say you can ride your motorcycle while you're on this specifically, but the pictures, and I watched it, I'm like, nah, does it really seem that obvious? Yeah, she's really happy to be riding her Harley on a blood thinner.
Well,
but it's not like we haven't interviewed other people that are doing high risk activities while on blood thinners.
We interviewed Steve Torrance, who goes 0 to 300 miles an hour in an eighth of a mile.
Yeah, but he's just not advertising that for the general public.
I don't think so. But he did advertise it for the general PS3AMD public, which is still the general public. So
anyway, let's just say Tim has a really weird habit, and we will be watching television. And he picks up the remote rather quickly, pauses in the middle of a commercial, and takes a photo, mostly for himself, but to sometimes send to our poor children or others, laughing and mocking the bottom of the, here we go, screen, of the television, where all the fine print goes by, and he reads it out loud as these people say it, a million miles an hour? Yeah, exactly.
Not legal in the state of Oregon. Yeah. Okay. So I have two. We'll just do a couple because we're getting a little long here, and I love mocking this stuff.
So he loves to mock this stuff because if you hear of all the potential side effects of this stuff,
So, and again, we're naming names. We think we've used these drugs.
Well, we can name these names because they advertise it on television.
So we don't really.
So it's not like we're calling them out. They have to list their side effects.
So, Jardiance is a diabetic medication, and so it has, when you read the, and this is what they actually put on their website because they have to, or else I guarantee you they wouldn't. So they put on there all this stuff about, the usual diabetic stuff, dehydration, hypoglycemia, blah, blah, blah. But this group of drugs has always fascinated me because it can cause necrotizing fasciitis, a rare but serious bacterial infection that causes damage to the tissue under the skin. But it doesn't just cause necrotizing fasciitis, because you can get necrotizing fasciitis on your chest, in your arm, in your leg. No, this causes necrotizing fasciitis in an area, and this is exactly the quote, in an area between and around your anus and genitals, your perineum. In other words, your taint. One of the side effects of this drug is that you get a taint-eating infection. And I don't know how rare it is. My assumption is it's very rare, or else it wouldn't have never been approved. But I'm just trying to imagine the memorial service where, they're memorializing Bill. And it's like, Bill, he drank a little too much. And, he kind of he let himself go. But he went to the doctor and he was getting his diabetes under control and until he died of a fungating taint infection. And then everyone just loses it and starts laughing.
Or crying. Or
because if Bill would have
dead silence from embarrassment
on a low carb diet.
If Bill had just actually paused and watched the commercial in slow-mo or read the fine print like you,
he would
be alive.
He would not have died of a flesh-eating taint infection.
Do you think so? Think of how many people are on that medication, how many people see that commercial, How many people really ponder that, think about it, or even aware that that's a possibility? And B, do you think that most people care?
Well, no, because they assume it's, I mean, it is rare. Like, I don't know how rare it is. And I'm not saying not to take this drug if you're on it. Like, I would never suggest that. Like, that's between you and your physician, right? Because
But
we're not here to practice medicine.
but
We're
that
here to
is a
mock the shit out of
that's
pharmaceutical
that's
companies.
a freakish side effect, honestly. Like
Yeah, like
like
how
how
did
do
they
you get
figure that one
I know.
out?
How do you get
How many people did they have to
necrotizing
study?
fasciitis of that area? Is it because you got I'm trying to make scientific sense out of this as a doctor. It's because, you know, as a diabetic, you have lack of blood flow. So what you're sitting on your ass that long that you lack blood flow to your perineum, and then you get
No, but
necrotizing fasciitis.
it's only
You know
it's
what I mean?
only it's only that class of drugs.
But
The
it's only on that
what is it? The
medication.
SGRPT whatever inhibitors or whatever. Like, it's a very specific side
So
effect.
what, you have a lot of
for
those
a-
receptors in your perineum? It's like, what the heck?
I don't know.
I think you should research it.
All I know is that I am the science, and I run, and I'm 81, so my taint will not be inflamed from Jardiance. It may be inflamed from other activity. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so but that's nothing. That is absolutely nothing. Nothing at all
Did you know?
compared to my winner.
Here you go. Here's a little bit of medical trivia for you. Did you know that it actually has a medical name? Fournier's gangrene.
Fournier. Of course, it's the French. Anything to do with the perineum is going to be the French, right? Fournier's gangrene.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it sound so good, and it's like, no, it's not good. It's very bad. And they ride bicycles a lot in Paris. I'm wondering if that's where it came from. I was riding a bike. I had an ingrown hair. Before you know it, my entire taint is just blown up. It is exploded.
And what's the survival rate of that?
Not very good.
The mortality rate is 11 to 22%.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you survive, the treatment for this is surgery. So they have to cut out all the inflamed, infected, fetid, horrible.
But just, and
you're not riding your Harley to Sturgis anymore, are you?
That's a bad area because, you know, your pelvis is right above it,
and it's
full of blood vessels, and it can spread very quickly to your intestines. So anyway,
so
it's not like losing a little toe or anything like that.
No, it's not like.
But anyway,
I had to go in for a tape transplant. I'd like to pick the donor.
Gosh. Pick another commercial.
Okay, so my personal favorite for the stupidest drug in the world is Xiaflex. Okay, so Xiaflex.
Not Xanaflex.
No.
But Xiaflex.
Xiaflex actually has an indication for Dupuytren's contracture, where you get these contractures in your hand, and that's reasonable. That is a very reasonable thing to treat.
If you don't know what that is, Dupuytren's contracture, it's when you get the little claw hand, the tendons in your palm get tight,
and they get kind of scarred up.
Yes,
and it can be quite debilitating. So yes, okay.
You know, you get that popping trigger finger going on.
So
there's a medication for
this drug that kind of dissolves these scar-like plaques.
What's that made out of?
And
I know what it's made out of.
And well, good for you. So there is another place in the body where you can get debilitating scar-like plaques that cause contractures. And of course, it's in the penis. And it causes a disease called Peyronie's disease, where usually from a previous penile fracture, which...
How do you fracture something that doesn't have a bone in it? We're not going to get into that.
Reverse cowgirl. So, well, that's how. You asked me a medical question. I gave you a medical answer.
Okay, I shouldn't even went there. Anyway,
so
yes, you can fracture the penis.
Yes.
Usually that's the cause, but not always. So wait, so we're already targeting this group of individuals in a high risk behavior category?
Well, not high risk. It might have been high risk when they were 19 years old, and now they're 60 and they got their Captain Hook. Arr. So this drug has been developed and has very specific indications.
This episode's going down the drain.
You have to have a penile curvature of at least 30 degrees, or else you can't get it. Okay?
That's significant.
30 degrees. So I'm sitting there. Do they have a Zyflex protractor?
Well,
with
there's
like
medical...
a green line.
There's...
So if you meet the 30-degree bend,
now
then
stop.
you would be, oh, I'm sorry, I'm only at 27 degrees, so I can't get the medication.
So you know they have protractors in orthopedics all the time and in neuro rehab. So I'm sure the urologists maybe have to use them.
And what would you call said protractor?
Well, we had fun with this.
You know, the schlongometer, we shall say. So you have to be 30
I call
degrees.
it the erector tractor.
Yeah. The
Anyway.
erector protractor.
Yes.
Brought to you by, I don't know who makes this. What company? Anyways. Okay. So you have you have to have a palpable plaque and
define. So a plaque is not a plaque like in your heart. It's a scar. I don't know what they call it that.
So
it's confusing.
All right.
So you have to have a scar and it has to be 30-degree angle to be approved by your insurance company for this medication.
Okay. So then you get the medication and it only gets better because you're not taking a pill to take the hook out of Captain Hook. It's an injection.
But there are pills.
And it has to be injected into the plaque. But when you read the prescribing information on how it has to be injected by a skilled urologist, which makes sense. I don't really want an unskilled urologist.
I think I would choose
injecting my penis.
I think I would choose.
But to find the plaque, to identify it and map the injection area, and this is the exact quote from the prescribing information: you must induce an erection and map out the plaque-filled area. And then you inject it when it's flaccid. And the studies, which were done on about 500 guys, showed after 4 cycles of taking this, up to 4 cycles of taking this, okay? So here, it gets even better. You can't have any kind of sexual activity between the first and second shot. I couldn't find the duration of time between the first and second shot. So if it's a day or a week, whatever. And then after the second shot, there's 0 sexual activity of any kind for 4 weeks. So it's like every month is No Nut November now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then they can do another cycle of treatment at 6 weeks. So you have 2 weeks in that window between treatments where you can be sexually active. Okay, so that's fine, right? Then it gets better because you look at the results, and these are not the results like in hard data. This is I'm sorry, hard data. I couldn't resist. This is the results, okay? Published in their advertising online. The best result they found after 52 weeks, 1 year, and up to 4 cycles of injections, which means for that year, you're not having sex for a minimum of 16 weeks, showed a 17% improvement in curvature. So if you're 30% curved to meet the criteria, that's the minimum curvature, and you get a 17% improvement, that means you have ridden the Blue Ball Express to hell for 16 weeks for 5.1 degrees of penile curvature improvement.
That's crazy.
And they have sold 250,000 doses of
Yeah.
this.
And I'm
You
thinking,
tell me this advertising
how,
doesn't work? Are you kidding me? Like when we lay it out this way, you're like, why on earth would you have to do this? Plus, the part that's great is you go to the urologist, they inject it, and then you have to do stretching and straightening exercises. And I'm like, based on the quality of my health insurance, do I get to pick who does the stretching and
you don't,
straightening exercise?
and they're paying you to get this, or they're paying for you. You don't have to pay them.
No, like it really is amazing.
So
Now, look,
that was distributed by Endo Pharmaceuticals, made by Auxilium Pharmaceutical.
now I don't want to look. I don't want
Now there's
to
there
throw
is
water.
a pill. There is a pill now instead.
You're right. Well, I take the pill, but it probably causes fungating ass cancer and
Probably.
tainting disease. But the thing is, I don't want to throw water on
I mean,
on a disease that some men are desperate to fix. I get it, right? Because pronies can be very painful. It can render you essentially impotent. Like I get that. Okay, so I'm not sitting here. I'm not mocking the disease. I'm not mocking men by any means that would pursue treatment for this, because if I was desperate enough, especially in the quality of our relationship, would I have somebody potentially inject me and what? Sure, I get it. And if it works for you, which it has for men,
but you know,
fantastic. All I'm saying is be a very aware consumer of what you're doing.
In some of the reading I was doing before on this, on the concerns from the FDA and people, that was some of it, is that a lot of their thoughts were that people are going to their doctor for things for drugs and medication that normally they wouldn't be bothered by, but because there's a commercial for something available, then they think they have a problem. So a lot of guys might be functioning well in their relationship and not even really think about it. And then what? They put themselves through all of this trauma. I mean, maybe it's for some people a helpful thing because they didn't know there was help out there. But for instance, there was all those commercials for a while for male pattern baldness, all those meds that they advertise direct to consumer for baldness. And I mean, it's not a life-threatening condition. It comes with no mortality other than vanity. But yet that was the point. It's like, meh, most guys maybe wouldn't care. And then you throw this out there, you put them on
but you know what? I have way less problem.
And drop their blood pressure, and now you got a problem.
Yeah, I have way less problem with a prescription for male, like for total vanity stuff, like male pattern baldness, hard-on pills, whatever it takes, like that. I honestly don't care. The advertise the living hell out of lifestyle medications. That does not bother me.
But where does the line cross when people see, and then this came up as well. So now they're advertising all these antidepressants and SSRIs. And yes, we talked that people are talking about it more, but someone coined the phrase. It was a physician back in the 60s, and he called it the Me Too drugs, where it's like, oh, well, I need that too because everybody else has it. I'm going to go to my doctor.
Yes.
And you get thrown on Prozac because it's the she thing of the day. And now you're on a Me Too drug because you saw it on TV and you thought you needed it.
I think that's a real thing. I think the harms done by mental health drugs are really incalculable, honestly. Now, does that not mean that we have saved people's lives and we have changed people's lives and we have increased their functionality with antidepressants? I think that that's true as well. But I think it's very, very complicated. And when everyone is on SSRI, major, or the new novel antipsychotics, and you see the percentages of people treated with these, when exercise, working on your relationship with your spouse, diet changes have been shown to work way better scientifically than most of the meds, it gives me concern. Like when you look at
we're a quick fix society and a pill driven society and a
and we'll get into this. We'll get into this with some more of our diet episodes.
But I'm just thinking, if you could take Extends and dive off the diving board as good as Bill.
Yeah, but Extends is not a real drug, but it has the greatest name in the history of any drug.
That commercial's so funny.
Extends.
The guy in his like
Oh no, those
balloon,
honestly, I
bathing
would
suit,
if
bloomers,
BS3MD could
diving
be.
off a board.
I mean, it's gone. I mean, it's complete horseshit. It's gone from the vernacular. It doesn't exist anymore. I would love to be sponsored by them because it's clearly nonsense, and it would be awesome.
Extends.
Yes.
Oh boy, that's pretty funny.
Yeah,
you could throw some money our way.
No, well, they don't exist anymore. But yeah, why don't they work? Because it did nothing. And they probably violated God knows how many laws advertising, be like Bill and these guys.
No, it was the innuendo commercial. It was the be like Bill, dive off a diving board with all these sexy chicks around him.
Yeah.
And get extends.
Yeah, no, it's
that's all they had to say.
Yeah, it's a crazy world.
So next
again,
time,
we're not advocating or prescribing or telling you to do or not to do something. That is up to you and your provider. We're not practicing medicine on the podcast, but we are advocating for thinking for yourself, for asking questions, and for being your own best health advocate. Because you know what? You are your own best health advocate.
Cheers to that, babe. See you next time.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit, uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.